Right, and are we ready to start recording?
Yes, sir. You're ready to go.
Okay. It is 10:01 by my clock. So we're going to go ahead and do a call to order. I'm going to go ahead and list off names, and please let us know if you're here. Susan Anderson. Susan, I think you're calling in from a phone. Okay, Hugh Biggle.
Here.
Good morning.
Oh, thank you, Susan. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. I think I figured it out.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. Alan Galicia.
Here.
Albert Garcia.
Good morning.
Hong Ho.
Here.
Bruce Littleton.
Here.
David Lucas.
Here.
Eduardo Rodales. Marshall Regal.
Present.
Great, thank you, Marshall. Raquel.
Here.
Ward Stanford.
Here.
Mike Sutton.
Here.
Christopher Wanamaker. Tessa Wessel.
Here.
John Willett. April Wire.
Here.
And Marty Zeig.
Here.
Okay. Are there any other members participating by teleconference I didn't mention? Okay, with that, we do have quorum, so this meeting of the MAG ITS committee is called to order. Please mute your microphone to eliminate any feedback, and use the raise your hand icon to be recognized, at which time you'll be able to unmute and begin. When doing so, please state your name and your organization. With that, we will move on to a call to the audience. Members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour before the posted start time. This is the opportunity for members of the public to comment on items that fall under MAG jurisdictions, but are not on the agenda or on the agenda for discussion and not for action. Omar, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the ITS committee. We received no comments on this item or any other item on the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Omar. And with that, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. Please take a few moments to review the minutes from the November 3rd meeting, if you have not already.
Mr. Chair, this is David Lucas from the City of Tempe. I have a small correction on item 8 of the agenda on my status update for last month. The minutes report that we added 3 new staff members. That should actually be 2.
Okay, thank you, David. Are there any other revisions at this time? Okay, with that, could I have a motion to recommend approval of the meeting minutes of the November 3rd, 2021? Please raise your hand. David,
Yes, I so move.
and do we have a second?
Steve, Ward Sanford, Avondale. I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Ward.
Couldn't find my hand, so sorry about that.
That's okay. So we have a motion from David and a second from Ward. When I call your name, please indicate yay or nay. Susan,
Yay.
Hugh,
Yay.
Alan,
Yay.
Albert,
Yay.
Hong,
Yay.
Bruce Littleton,
Yay.
and David already did. So did Eduardo join us? Okay, Marshall,
Yay.
Raquel,
Yay.
and Ward seconded. Mike Sutton,
Yay.
Tessa Wessel,
Yay.
April,
Yay.
and Marty.
Yay.
Okay, with a motion and a second, with the members polled, the motion passes with the revision noted by David. With that, we'll move on to item number 4, the MEG TSMNO Program Manager Jeff Jank will now provide updates and a report to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of ITS committee. The first item on my report is the federal updates. Unfortunately, our usual presenter, Miss Tony Whitfield, is on rotation assignment, and our favorite backup, Mr. Jeff King, has a conflict. So I would do my best to provide the update. The first item is a federal request for information for the development of guidance for electric vehicle charging infrastructure deployment. This RFI seeks comments from the public to inform the development of this guidance and inform the implementation of the charging and fueling infrastructure program. The URL of this RFI is included on the slide. The comment period is through the January 28th of next year. The next item is the National Crash Responder Safety Week. This year is November 8th through 14th. And provided on the slide is the web page containing the information of the resources for the Crash Responder Safety Week. There are also 2 video messages from the FHWA Acting Administrator, Stephanie Polak, and the NHTSA Acting Administrator, Dr. Steve Cliff, regarding the Crash Responder Safety Week. And finally, the third item is an announcement from that USDOT has created a new website on the ITS cybersecurity. And this website contains very useful information and resources for transportation system manufacturers, integrator, and operator to support making their ITS infrastructure secure and cyber resilient. The URL of this ITS cybersecurity website is included on the slide. Next slide, please. The next item is an update on the FY 2022 TSOP projects, and I would like to invite Mr. Eric Nava to provide the update.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the ITS committee meeting. This is another brief update on our current FY22 list of projects as seen on the slide. We are still currently working through getting the initial projects through for task order execution. We're going through the ADOT process on getting DBE requirements and things of that sort. And working with our new staff and fiscal services to do all the procurement and contracting. And then we are currently also scoping out the spring projects that will be starting early next year in 2023. So we will be reaching out to those agencies on those upcoming projects as well. And that concludes my update.
Thank you, Eric. MEG TSOP project programs is a well-received regional service. I'd like to thank Eric for his leadership. Also, other MEG staff, Omar, Mohammed, for managing those projects. Next slide, please. Well, it's the end of the year, so the schedule for the next year, FY 2022, MEG ITS committee meetings has been distributed to the committee member earlier. And it is still the first Wednesday at 10 a.m. The meeting format is virtual until further notice, given this current COVID situation. Next slide, please. The next item is an update on the MEG Regional ITS Inventory and Performance Reporting System Planning Study. In March ITS committee meeting, I first reported the planning for a regional ITS inventory and performance reporting system. And I think we discussed the importance of knowing where the gaps are in support of planning. I discussed the desire to automate the collection of some of the inventory data, say by collecting the existing ITS device inventory database from the city's TMC. And how this, and also we discussed how this system will be used to fulfill the requirement of a MEG SMNO plan, that is to conduct systematic evaluation on the performance of the ITS projects. And I describe a very high-level vision of what the system needs to be, and it's going to be a GIS-based and compatible with the current MEG existing GIS-based performance measurement systems, such as the bridge and arterial performance measurement system, also the recent RTP project selection tools. And so the whole notion of being compatible is all the data available in these other systems will then be available to us for our own purpose for inventory or performance measurement. Today, I'd like to report on the progress that we have made to date. We're developing a task order with Kimley Horn and Associate through the ITS Safety on Call contract for a planning study to develop the requirement of the system. The product of this study will help develop the functional specification for the RFP for the system implementation expected in late 2022. The budget for this planning study is $80K, and the project duration is 8 months. And the reason for going to Kimley Horn is because of this emphasis of leveraging the electronic data, inventory data collection capability, and that Kimley Horn is well-versed with the centralized traffic management system. Well, this concludes my program manager's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. The next item is our proposed FY 2023 and FY 2024 priority listings of the systems management and operations projects for programming. There is an action requested. On August 2nd, 2021, MAG issued a call for projects for SMNO competitive applications. 31 applications were received, and technically evaluated by the MAG ITS committee members. Today, MAG will share with us the final rankings based on the technical and quantitative evaluation criteria. I'd like to invite Jeff Jenk to present this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, member of ITS committee. Today is the day. Next slide, please. Great. Today is the day that we are learning about the technical evaluation results of the call for FY 2023 and 2024 projects. The ITS committee has worked hard since March of this year to develop the evaluation methodology through a series of working group meetings. The call for project for ITS projects was released on August 2nd. I'm seeing the comment here. Along with other transportation modes and programs under the management of the MAG ITIP group under the leadership of Mr. Patrick Stone. The proposals were due on September 17th, and a total of 31 project applications were received, competing for a total of $22 million of the federal CMAQ funds in 3 priority areas. The technical evaluation is made up of scores in 3 aspects. First, the quantitative measures. Those are taking the input from your application form. The qualitative measures are from the ITS committee members. And then finally, because this is a CMAQ funding, we have the air quality score developed by the MAG Air Quality Task Force. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the summary of the result, that we have 3 buckets of the budgets available. For bucket 1, we have 7 applications. The total federal ask is $4.8 million, competing for a budget of 5.3. Bucket 2, the regional priority arterial, we have 13 projects for a total federal ask of 9.2 million, and competing, and the available budget is $14 million. The third bucket, local priority corridors, we received 11 projects, and for a total federal ask of 7.6 million, and the available budget is only $3.3 million. So next slide, please. So this is just kind of dwell into each bucket and to show you the priority listing. And this is the priority listing based on the total evaluation score for bucket 1, the ICM projects. And as I reported, that there are more budget than the total ask. Next slide, please. And this is the priority listing based on total evaluation score for bucket number 2. Again, we do have more budget than the total federal ask amount, which is $9.2 million. Next slide, please. So this is the bucket 3 priority listing for a total of 11 projects that we do not have sufficient fund to cover all projects, and the total federal ask is 7.5 million, while we only have $3.3 million in the budget. Great. Next slide, please. So with this item, we have a request for committee actions to approve this technical evaluation result, the priority listing, and to forward it to the next policy committee meeting, which is the Transportation Review Committee for programming. I would like to ask if any committee member have any questions, or Mr. Chair, would you please facilitate the committee action?
Yes. So Bruce, you have a question?
Yeah, before we actually set a motion, because it's unclear what we're looking to move forward. The total ask was less than the total budget, but is the committee going to recommend that we stay within budget within each category? In which case we're looking at making a decision within each category for some projects not getting funded? Or is this moving forward as, since it's under total budget, that it would be reallocated and that all submissions, since it comes into the total budget, would move forward to be considered for funding? So, you know, as a voting member, I need to know what I'm voting for.
Great. I think we have Patrick Stone, who is overseeing the overall TIP call for projects. And Patrick, will you be able to answer this question?
Yeah, certainly, Jeff. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bruce, so all the ITS committee is actually recommending is the ranked priority listing of projects. No funding decisions are actually made at this committee. What will happen is the programming will actually happen starting at TRC. So all the committee really does is reviews the scoring, says it makes sense, the ranked order looks correct, and that's the action, is just to approve the listing, not to actually deal with the funding or the programming.
Thank you, Patrick. That makes sense. Marshall, do you have a follow-up question after hearing Patrick's answer?
Yeah, well, I would like the motion to include the following language. The ITS committee requests due consideration be given by the authorities having jurisdiction to apply remaining excess funds for buckets 1 and 2 to fund prioritized projects in bucket 3 as available.
Jeff, if you don't mind, I'll take this one as
Yes,
well. Mr. Chair, Marshall. So unfortunately, that's a policy decision and it can't be made by this committee. The SM&O plan that was previously approved had a corresponding financial plan that went all the way up through and including regional council. It identified the buckets and identified the funding allocations to those buckets. Any shifting of those buckets actually is going to take another policy action. So potentially, depending on the outcome, if this moves through the committee as we expect and gets approved at January regional council, the discussion and the thought has been coming back to and starting at the ITS committee to have that conversation about those unprogrammed dollars.
Okay, but I'm just asking that the comment be added to the motion, that consideration be given. I'm not asking that it be done. I'm asking that the consideration be given. I believe that the committee, and again, I'm not speaking for the committee, but and that's what the voting is, and that's where the motion would include this language. I believe there's no other way for this concept to get forward. So I don't really, I would imagine that this is an administrative decision that could be made. I just want to raise the awareness, especially if the committee votes and says, yes, this is how the committee feels, this is what we think is appropriate to happen, that language be included in the motion. It's not a demand, it's a request for consideration.
Go ahead.
No, I apologize, Chair. I was just going to ask Marshall if he could actually restate that request so that I can capture it and kind of mull it over, if you shall.
Sure.
Thank you.
The ITS committee requests due consideration be given by the authorities having jurisdiction to applying remaining excess funds for buckets 1 and 2 to fund prioritized projects in bucket 3 as available.
Thank you, Marshall, for that. I wanted to make sure I captured it in my head.
Sure.
I apologize. I'm not 100% comfortable with that. It's not to say it's correct or incorrect. You know, obviously having a limited exposure at MAG, I would want to make sure that we aren't inadvertently stepping on future committees' toes. And to your point, I get where you're going, Marshall. Hey, the request is just to ask for that consideration of swapping that funding. I'm not 100% sure TRC can even make that swap because it does become a policy consideration. I don't know what level of authority they have to say they could even do it. I don't think it necessarily negates the request from the ITS committee to say, hey, if available, and to your point, I appreciate that at the end of the statement, hey, if available, we'd like the consideration to be made to have that recommendation in place.
And Patrick, I don't disagree. I don't know what the TRC level is, but I know they're not the end all. They too make recommendations to the next level. And so, you know, that's why the language is the authorities having jurisdiction, because I'm not saying it's the TRC even, but it's giving them the opportunity then to then take that forward to the next level.
Yeah, I'm really stymied here, unfortunately, Mr. Chair, members of the committees, because I don't want to make a recommendation and say, yeah, that's fine, Marshall, we can go ahead and provide that, and then we run afoul of some process, and we're going to be coming back to the ITS committee to say, well, the action was incorrect, and we have to redo the requested action. I'll have to check on it. I don't know how many other items you have on the agenda, but I can certainly do some quick research, see if we can table this item and come back to it in a few moments.
Sure. We still have another presentation, so maybe 25 minutes.
All right. Yeah. And Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, I would ask that we just table this item for the moment. Let me real quick do some research, see if I can get an answer and come back to the committee in a couple minutes with hopefully a better path forward.
I appreciate that, Patrick. And yeah, I think we can go ahead and table this for now and move on to the next item.
All right. I will step aside for a few moments and I will be back with committee shortly. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and table number 5 for now. We're going to move on to item number 6. As an Aztec initiative, McDOT implemented a regionally shared ATS-PM system based on the open source system originally developed by UDOT. The Aztec system was uniquely configured to work across jurisdictions using a single backend system and a unified interface. Today, McDOT will
Thank you for saying what you did.
The evolution.
You said it much more eloquently, but I didn't want to vote without.
Today, McDOT will present the evolution of the Aztec ATS-PM system since its debut and share the plans for future improvements. I'd like to invite Jeff Jenk to provide an overview on this item.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, ITS committee members. ATS-PM is among the most talked about ITS emerging technologies. And in the grand scheme that it is still in its infancy. I mean, today, all of the traffic signal controller that we deploy comes with the functionality to collect the high resolution controller data supporting the ATS-PM performance measures. And we'd like to thank McDOT for his leadership creating or implementing this version of ATS-PM based on the UDOT open source software. The McDOT implementation is a unique one, being it was implemented so that all jurisdictions, not only for a single jurisdiction, could use this backend service. And last month, we heard the excellent presentation from Alan Davis of the Georgia Department of Transportation on their experience with ATS-PM. And Alan is really, I mean, one of the early contributors to the development of ATS-PM. Today, as a sequel, I conveniently invited Ms. April Wire, who oversees the McDOT ATS-PM program, to provide this update and the exciting plan for future improvements. So thank you, April, for doing this.
All right, thank you, Jeff. So we can go ahead and start the presentation. So like Jeff said, that we've done a lot of work in our region with ATS-PMs, and honestly, I think our region is looked at as a subject matter expert in ATS-PM. We've taken a lot of things like the work that GDOT has done with their ATS-PM system and the performance metrics that they've developed, and kind of started piloting it at McDOT to see what the functionality, capability, how we can use it on a day-to-day basis, and how it could be scaled for the region. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now and give a quick overview of our ATS-PM website for Aztec and McDOT. Give me 1 second. Sorry, I'm working off of one screen, so I just got to jump from tab to tab. But so here is the Aztec McDOT ATS-PM website. And so Alan Davis the other day gave a really good overview of what ATS-PMs really is, so I'm not going to go over that, but I'm just going to walk you through some of the functionality of our website. So across the top, you'll see there's some good interactive things. So if you click on this, it takes you to all the RADS websites, so just FYI on that. So there's a couple of good shortcut clicks on this website if you're ever looking at them. You don't have to have a login to actually view any of the information on this ATS-PM website. It's open to the public in a sense. As long as you have the URL, you can get to it. There is a login if you want to configure your detection systems and set it up. So as a regional partner that's included in ATS-PM, you'll likely have to have that to be able to modify your setup with your detection and the layout, because everyone's is a bit different. We wanted to streamline that a little bit, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But you know, everyone's detection layout is a bit different from local agency to local agency. But let's go ahead and go over this top. So over here, you'll see like underneath the measures, the signal one will actually take you to this page right here. Because this is a live demo and my Wi-Fi is a little weak, I don't want to press on too many things, so I'm not going to go ahead and press on that. But it takes you to this front page right here. And then the reports, it gives you like usage on what charts are used the most, how to configure things, the aggregation of the data. I don't look at the reports too often, honestly. I can probably guess that the highest used metrics are the top two, this Purdue phase termination and split monitor. And then the Purdue coordination diagram are probably the three top used ones. So to use ATS-PM, you don't have to have lane by lane detection everywhere or phase by phase detection. If it's not configured in this ATS-PM system, which many of the agencies are set up like that, you'll at least get the top four, the Purdue phase termination, split monitor, the pedestrian delay, and the preemption one. So at least those top four will pop up. And then some other things that I've gone through quite a bit is FAQ. It answers a lot of different questions. I'll go ahead and click on it for you. A lot of different questions on how to navigate ATS-PM, why it was created, what's the use case of it, anything and everything that, you know, somebody at a high level would ask a question on. So they give pretty good answers, honestly. UDOT developed this like pretty early on with the open source software that they created. So I do encourage you, if you are new to the ATS-PM space or even new to this website, to go through and peruse through these FAQ questions, because they're actually pretty good. Then they have some other documentation on just other reports that they've done over time and they've uploaded here. So good background information if you ever have time to look into that. There are some really good manuals here. GDOT did a lot of these the last couple of years because there was a need for people to have a better understanding of this installation manual of if you don't have ATS-PMs and want to kickstart it on your own, how do you install it? Because me, with my background being civil engineering, it would probably take me quite a bit of time to figure out how to install it on our own because it is open source, it's free, but it's not the easiest thing to do. GDOT did create an executable file, so it's an installer, so you could hit like, next for the installation. So it's a bit easier, but if you're first starting, that's what this installation manual is. Because we do have a regional platform, the expectation is not for each of the local agencies to go through this effort on their own, but we already have this platform. So McDOT through Aztec is able to pull it in and set it up for each one of the local agencies. There's other just manuals on the different components of ATS-PMs, how to read the reports, use cases, whatnot. So again, very good resource information. GDOT did pay a consultant to put these together, so they're very well written. Other things like quick presentations, I think these are kind of outdated. You can tell by the dates, like 2016, 2018, but still really useful information. Just quick overviews that you've probably heard over time through different presentations at ITS and their ITS conferences or ITE conferences. And then there's an about that I think talks about our version and whatnot. So I'm going to go back to the main screen here and go through this a little bit. So you'll see here that there's two different ways to look at your signals. There's one by list and one by map. I use the map more. These numbers mean something. The first three numbers you'll see here as I click on this, that the pilot agencies, I still call them pilot agencies because we're still kind of growing this and not everyone is included yet, but each one of the agencies that are included in this ATS-PM platform are listed here. And the first three numbers of the signal number is associated with what local agency it belongs to. And then the last four come from the way that I think each agency numbers their signals. So that's where those numbers come from. So I'm just going to pull up 99th and Burns right now. And so let's just take a look at some of these tables. And I'm just going to use the caveat of this is a work in progress. There's a lot of things that over time that we've realized need improvement. As we've done the pilot, we kind of did it quick and dirty in the sense that it was a pilot, it was a proof of concept in a sense, and then we kind of grew it from there. But we probably didn't do a very good job of cleaning things up that needed to be cleaned up as we were growing it. And we're coming back and recognizing those things and correcting those things. So you'll notice that sometimes like everything doesn't work perfectly. We only pull the data once a day versus like a lot of agencies pull it every 15 minutes at a minimum, just because we want that fresh live data in real time. So we're a little bit behind on that and we're working on that. You'll see that this Purdue phase termination, there's something funky going on. So I need to talk to Alex Limko that oversees our RAD system to see why we have so much yellow here. Yellow means unknown, but honestly, on a day-to-day basis, I forget what these colors mean. So I look at this chart legend quite a bit. This chart, it actually tells you quite a bit of information, but with all it being one color, it's not quite working well. We're making some tweaks on the back end, so I think that's what's causing it. So let's go to the split monitor. Give it a minute to load. But I look at the split monitor quite a bit just to see what's going on with each one of the phases. At this particular intersection, we do have dynamic max going on. So you'll see like there's quite a bit of red, but I'm not really concerned with the red as long as it's not continuously red, a lot of red, I guess. You can quickly skim through these and just see like how your signal is performing. It tells you quite a bit of information. Like there's splotches of red here, but the dynamic max you can tell is kicking in and adjusting the max time, so it's gapping out and then going back. So just some quick checks when you get calls or are trying to troubleshoot signals and whatnot. But really importantly, what I would like to point out is like this legend up here with the colors is really, really important. So even if you don't quite know what you're looking at as far as these charts because it can be very overwhelming, refer back to the legend quite a bit. Just to give you a refresher on what those colors actually mean. You can pick days here on this calendar over here and the time period, so you can even squish it down into our time chunks instead of a 24-hour time chunk. You can, over here is what the graph, you can customize the graph and fix your, y-axis and stuff like that. So there's a few things that are nuances that I notice on a day-to-day basis that need to be fixed. And they have been identified, so we're going through and kind of cleaning that up. But this does give you a lot of information on each individual intersection. And so another thing that we've done is taken, I shouldn't say stolen, but we've taken the great work that UDOT has done with their Mark 1 being renamed to SIGOPS, their dashboard, and implemented it for McDOT. And so we've been kind of testing this over the last year. And so the first around 2 years ago, we deployed this dashboard, and we started with just a handful of corridors that are listed over here. Now we've included all 12 of significant corridors that McDOT has identified for ourselves, ones that we have performance metrics that need to be reported out on. So you can see all 12 are identified here. You can filter for all of the corridors or very specific corridors, and they have limits associated with them. And then here you can filter by month on what you want to see. And right now, like you can see here, it only has McDOT, but there is, it can be scaled to include as many local agencies as we want. The backbone of this goes back to that very rich high resolution data that's coming from your controllers that is being, pushed to RADs and processed through the ATSPM software and pushed onto this website. So the back end is the same for this dashboard as well. And so on here, you can see like there's volume, just a quick overview on what is going on your corridors. Honestly, I don't look at this every day, but I do look at it on a monthly level just to see how we're performing. You can see like the arrivals on green, like have goals associated with that, the progression ratio. This website is really good because it does have somewhere in here, I think it's in the about section that has like a glossary of what each one of these things mean. So on a high level, if you don't know what a progression ratio is, you can see that it's the G over C. It gives you the definition and stuff like that there. So it's actually pretty good. GDOT did a really good job on this, and I actually really enjoy working with this. There's room definitely for growth as we work with our developers to implement this on pulling in other metrics that we see valuable. It's very customizable. I think at some point we as a region need to have a conversation on what we want to see, but there's some steps that need to happen before we get to that point. Here you can see like the equipment measures on how many detectors are online versus offline, right? So you can have performance metrics associated with that, communication uptime and downtime, pedestrian detector availability, like are your pedestrian push buttons good, or are they stuck? What's going on with that? They have some volume parameters and whatnot. And so talking about like all this back end data coming from that high resolution data, that's why like the setup with the detectors within ATSPM is really, really important. So so that's just a quick overview on the two websites. So let me jump into the presentation and I'll talk about some of the work that we are doing with detector configuration and cleaning it up and some other things. So Eric, can you pull up the presentation again? Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so just quick overview on why we started even doing ATSPMs in our region. As you can see, like we have over 33,100 signals in our Phoenix metropolitan area. This data was coming from 2017, so that number is obviously greater now. On average, we have 88% of those signals connected through some form of communication back to our TMCs. And then we have 570 signals that are being pushed into our ATS-PM system. So, I mean, that's a small percentage when you're looking at the 3,300 number, but at the same time, like, this is a work in progress. So we're doing a lot of things to make the system more robust because that's a lot of data coming in. Right now we have 9 agencies participating, and in the future we're planning on being able to pull in more agencies as well. Next slide. And so I like to talk about this pyramid a lot. It's the hierarchy of needs for traffic signals. I think we are all familiar with it, but it's kind of nice to visualize it every once in a while. So on the very bottom of the pyramid, you always have to have strong communications and strong detection. You can, interchange those on what's really on the bottom. Is it communications or is it detection? You can argue that all day long, but those two things are always at the bottom. And then having really good local timing that meet the standards and whatnot is always important. And then after you complete those 3 layers, and you have like coordination aspects that will help move traffic along, and then adaptive is kind of like the cherry on top. But all of that, you can do all those things, but I feel like you need some performance metrics to kind of gauge where you are with all of those things and see what you really need to focus on. So this chart is always really important to kind of have in mind when you implement projects, and have performance metrics in mind on how you're gauging the performance of each one of these layers. Next slide. So I wanted to talk about the different phases of ATS-PM. We started this effort for Aztec back in 2015, and we continue to move forward and have projects every year. We started with phase 1 in 2015 being like the installation of the servers, pulling in the 7 agencies with 10 intersections to kind of sample what does ATS-PM do, how does it help us in our TMCs and our daily operations. We started with UDOT's version of 4.0, and we work with FHWA to hold a workshop to kind of spread the word on the capabilities of ATS-PM. We encourage just the use of ATS-PM. It doesn't have to be the UDOT version, because we recognize that there's a lot of vendors out there supplying really, really good products. They're just very costly. And we've started our ATS-PM effort before some of those vendor solutions even came out. So at some point, I think we probably need to re-explore, like, what are we looking for in our ATS-PM system, and what is already available off the shelf versus what can we continue to develop on our own, cost effectiveness and whatnot. So that's a later discussion. Then in 2017, 2 years later, we started phase 2. That's when we brought in all of McDOT and all of Tempe signalized intersections that have communications. As we went through that effort, we realized that there's a lot of different things in the controller that need to be troubleshooted that we wanted to understand before we pulled in more agencies and brought in more signals. There's just different things as far as like, the controller does some weird stuff sometimes, or it resets certain parameters. So you have to go in and back check. Was it set to a 1 or a 0? It's supposed to be a 0, and somehow it turned into a 1. So now we have to go back and do that. Or are there other communications related things that needed to be troubleshooted? So there was a lot of controllers troubleshooting between McDOT and Tempe at that time. I think we had a good handle on what causes some issues with data pulls within ATS-PM. So I think we're good on that one, and can provide between McDOT and Tempe, the region, a lot of guidance on how to maneuver and get your ATS-PM data pulls stable and your controller stable, and what to look for when you're troubleshooting some of these things. I think that's the most frustrating thing when it comes to any, platform or data or, types of information, charts that you're looking at, tools that you're looking at, is the reliability aspects of it. So that's in 2017, we try to really focus down on that and have a good handle on that, because we didn't want all the agencies trying to struggle through these same problems. So I think a lot of good lessons learned came out of that. In 2018, we ended up exploring a lot of the vendor solutions. I think that was the year when every single ATS-PM vendor came out and tapped everyone on the shoulder to, sell their product in a sense. As we had conversations at Aztec regarding those vendor solutions, we realized that we weren't really ready to go that route yet. We had a really good, foundation system with the UDOT open source software that we've already deployed. So we wanted to just go ahead and grow that. As I've talked with vendors over the last couple of years, the work that we've done with our ATS-PM system will never be null and void because that's the foundational work, even to use the vendor solutions is to get all of that set up. So I think our region has done a very good job of starting that process. And if we ever do decide to go a different route and not do open source, it is all not for nothing and can be used as we move forward into the future. And so in 2018, we started using ATS-PMs more on the operational level. McDOT used ATS-PMs to retime 2 corridors for coordination, really pushing the consultants to use that more. I think that's a constant push and something that definitely needs to be pushed more for the consultants to use because it is a very great tool, but a lot of times a lot of people don't understand how to use them, how they're applicable, and we go back to the regular process of collecting turn and management counts for one day and then building our synchro models where a lot of that stuff can be avoided. It's just finessing that a little bit more and getting the consultants to, understand ATS-PMs a little bit more on how they can use it to retime and not have to do all the data collection and all the fine tuning and breaking the process down in smaller instead of having this huge project. So in 2019, we did more education. I think we still wanted more buy-in because there was a little bit of confusion on how to, set up your detector configurations cleanly in ATS-PM. That's an ongoing thing. That was the year that Mark Taylor from UDOT actually came out, and we had a user's workshop with him. It was kind of a free form. Mark is very versed in ATS-PMs, obviously, and had a lot of good information to share. I think a lot of the audience members got very good feedback from him on, how to just resolve some day-to-day things that we've always had issues with. That year, we also increased the number of signals in ATS-PMs and increased the agency participation. Next slide. So some of our current efforts right now, we've gotten quite a bit of funding through the last round of SMO TIP project funding. And so they're all coming to fruition right now. We've gone through the procurement stages of getting contractors, consultants, and whatnot on board. So we're actually finally in the process of moving those projects forward. Some of the things that we've done in parallel to that is we updated our version, I think it was 2 years ago outside of the larger funded grant projects. And we are on the latest version of ATS-PM right now, 4.2.3. And then in 2020, McDOT also went through the effort of piloting the Mark I platform dashboard that I showed you, the second website that I showed you with the boxes. So we did that with McDOT's priority corridors. And then in 2021, we are currently wrapping up a project with TrafOps that we got funding through the ACTI Council for, and that was to clean up the existing detector channel assignments that are mapped in ATS-PM, that detector configuration that I mentioned earlier. So with that effort, TrafOps helped develop a tool that helps visualize the layout of the detectors better. So we're in the process of pulling that into the open source code right now. It's not available right now on our Aztec version of ATS-PM, but it should be available within the next couple of months or so. We're in the process of updating our version again to, it's not quite 4.2.4, but an intermediate one. So we'll see that feature in the very, very near future. As part of that project, we also brought in, I think, the 10 intersections that ADOT had in the ATS-PM system as well to clean up their detectors as well. So that, I think that is a good overall project that we're giving back to the ATS-PM community. All of the, little software enhancement improvements that we've undergone as part of the proposal has always included putting it back onto GitHub, the open source software, I don't know what to call it, site, I guess, where the UDOT version is held so that others can, use what we've created as well. Next slide. So some upcoming projects. One of the projects that was funded through the last round of SMO monies was the RAD's core re-architecture. So we call it TE069. So it includes updating to the newest version of whenever we get to that point, because there's always a new version out. So we'll get that. That's included in it. Also included in it is a initial deployment of bringing in more agencies into the Mark 1 dashboard. So that's coming down the pipeline too. We wanted to bring in at least 3 new agencies into ATSPM altogether. I know some agencies have asked about it, and we haven't had enough, space in our servers or whatever the reason may be to pull them in. But with this project that is, I think the contract just got signed, so there'll be more movement on it in the next couple of months to bring in any agencies that are that aren't in the ATSPM platform currently. So if you're interested, I really, really encourage you to reach out to me and let me know, myself or Alex Lumpkin know, so that we can include you. Once you're set up into our system, it's honestly kind of painless to bring in more intersections. So it's just that initial work of bringing in your agencies and making that connection through RADS to pull your data. And then once that's set, it's not too bad to pull in, all of your intersections. And then also included in this, the last dot is to furnish and install virtual servers for each of the agencies that are, in ATSPM. One of the things that we recognized very early on is when we did the pilot, all the watchdog notifications, email notifications that go out regarding, detector failures, stuck PED push buttons, max calls. There's a lot of good watchdog features, alerts that are included with the original version of ATSPM. But with our pilot project, we turned them all off because we decided that each agency didn't want to see each agency's notifications. So McDOT didn't want to see, Chandler's notifications about stuck PED push buttons all the time because it wasn't relevant to us. And we recognized that very early on that would be a lot of emails coming through. We already all get a lot of emails, so it would just be more emails that are ignored over time. So we didn't want to do that. So that's why those notifications were turned off. But as we move forward, we recognize that those notifications are kind of the meat of what ATSPMs is about, to make it a little bit more automated so you don't have to go hunting for, an error within your traffic signal system. So with that, we are breaking out each agency into their own separate server so we can turn on those notifications instead of all the agencies being on one server. So that's the main effort of this project. Next slide. So in upcoming RADS projects slated for FY 2020 or 2024, we are envisioning the RADS and ARIS system starting to pull in more turning movement count data. We have a lot of systems out there like detection systems that are able to collect that very granular lane by lane turning movement count data. We started pulling in that data for McDOT for the Econolite vision systems. And it seems to be pretty solid, honestly. We did an initial study to validate the data, but ran into some hurdles. So that report was kind of inconclusive. So we're re-resurrecting phase 2 of that report to see how solid that count data is. But we see the value of pulling in that data and also creating a new performance metrics within ATSPM that helps visualize the turning movement count more traditionally, as you would see if you paid somebody to go out there and count it, coming from like, the JMAR count boards, a report like that is what we're wanting. So that's one feature that is coming down the pipeline more in 2024 and beyond. We also want to go in, we recognize that, you know, the foundation of solid ATS-PM information comes from that detection configuration. So we want to do an effort to pretty much go in to each of the local agencies, intersections, or, you know, signals, and clean that up for everyone. I know that's a huge ask for the agency. We already have a lot on our plate on a day-to-day basis, so that was included in a future project as well. The Mark 1 dashboard, we already have the dashboard set up, but it does take time and, you know, resources to configure each of the corridors. So we wanted to do that as part of this upcoming project in 2024. And we were going to focus on the corridors that have been historically reported out with a Aztec performance indicators book. There's a bunch of corridors in that, so we were going to start there. But there's always, you know, room for communication on helping to identify what those key corridors should be, if it shouldn't be those, so that we have room to adjust on that. And that last blue box is talking about reporting out of the turning movement counts that I just talked about earlier. Next slide. So on the user side, so all of those enhancements were more on the system side. On the user side, we recognize that we don't talk enough about ATS-PMs. It goes in ways that it's really hot for a minute, and then, you know, the next couple of months we get busy, and then we forget about it. And then I think a lot of agencies forget that ATS-PMs our Aztec version of ATS-PMs is out there. So I think we need to talk about it more. And so one of the needs that came out of our ATS-PM gap study that ITERA shared at one of the last Aztec meetings, talked about establishing a users group. I think that's a really good suggestion. I think there's a handful of power users, but we need to have more conversations collaboratively to, you know, help identify training, help give trainings. I'm sure you guys are tired of me always talking about ATS-PM, so I think we need some new faces and some new voices and some new perspectives and just a different viewpoint and a different viewpoint on how to explain things. So there's just two different things that the user groups could really talk about. It's what metrics should we focus on? What new metrics need to be developed? Because there's a lot of good things that, you know, we do on our own by pulling in data and manipulating in Excel and overlaying certain data on top of each other, but that's a very, very like strenuous thing to be doing it by hand. So if there's metrics like that can be, you know, more automated in ATS-PM, we should identify those things and at least have a list of, you know, prioritizing what metrics are of need for our region. And then also talking about training, because there's a lot of movement in our industry. I feel like the last few years, a lot of new faces, a lot of young faces, and ATS-PM, like we needed to be fresh on that and keep it going and keep people informed on it, because the more people know about it, the more they're more likely to use it. Next slide. And so these are the two websites of the ATS-PMs. I think the URLs are changing, but these two right now are working. When the new website URLs come out, I will definitely share them amongst the group, but these are what they are right now. These are the two websites that I showed earlier on. Next slide. And that is it. So I will turn it back to Jeff.
Great, thank you, April. I mean, it's good to hear another update. There are so many things in the plan. So I have one question, because I've, like you said, that I've been hit by vendors and other third party. Nowadays, I roughly counted more than a dozen or so of these ATM, SPM related services and products. And I know in the past, our TIP project, I mean, at least Queen Creek, you know, they are pursuing the ATS-PM, that is to make the controller, you know, to implement a new controller capable of collecting that data, and they will go with their traffic management system manufacturers, ATS-PMs. So I felt that I've learned from your presentation that Aztec ATSPM has a regional purpose to it, and it's not in direct competition with a third party, meaning if an agency's found, a third party services, they could still participate in the Aztec version of the ATSPM. And the benefit that I've heard was in this high resolution controller data, it contains all the detector actuation informations. And, with some conversion, and those are your turning movement count, as you clearly spelled out. And we're talking about in the future, 10 years from today, all the controller are collecting the high resolution data, and we will all then have the turning movement count. It's a very exciting purpose for doing this, but thank you for your leaderships. And, I think this is a subject, like you said, that you need to have some constant reminder of its existence, and perhaps an agency interested in this might need a designated staff focusing on these issues. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so one additional comment. So I think the viewpoint of the ATSPM community nationally is not what version you use, because you can use UDOT's version, you can use the vendor's version, but honestly, some of the things that we saw with the vendor versions of ATSPM at the time is they're creating the same things, but just, in different colors or, a different layout or whatever, that it's all pulling from the same information. But I encourage the agencies to explore what's currently available, because we are already doing the work, developing this ATSPM platform and having, it ready for the region. I'm not saying you shouldn't go out and venture what the vendor solutions are, but kind of understand what we already have before you go and spend the money on paying for a vendor version of ATSPM, because it is costly and it's a continuous cost. It's like, back in the day when you had a flip phone and then you moved to a smartphone, once you get it, there's no turning back. That cost is there moving forward. So I'm always open to sharing, going over ATSPM in more detail. We can even pull in your agency data at one or two locations to see, have you yourself play with it to see the, capabilities of it before you do venture out and go with a very costly solution. But what Jeff had mentioned is correct.
Yeah, I think, thanks, April. You're hitting an interesting point that, the beginning of the ATSPM dashboard was the open source version. And in that open source version, that's where those very famous, often frequently mentioned Purdue, coordination diagram split or split failure or arrival on green, all those matrices were kind of defined by the open source and made available to any of the vendor product. So literally, if you go to a vendor product, like April said, that likely is using exactly the same source code, and they might dress it up differently in terms of the attributes. So to understand what this free offers is maybe also useful when you are comparing the different vendor product. And honestly, I did see at least a few cases, the vendor pretty much offer a majority of this feature are from the open source platform.
Good. Thanks, April and Jeff. And I've been excited to see too that at least some of the revised ATMS softwares out there are starting to dabble in the ATSPMs as well. And I know of at least one that basically provides the ATSPM data in an API format, so that it would be super easy for the integration into something like what McDonough has as a regional thing, so that the data can just be imported directly in. So we'll look forward to seeing more and more opportunities there as we move forward. Okay, I did not see, is Patrick back with us?
Mr. Chair, yes, I am back.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and give you the floor then, and if you could share with us what you've learned, and we'll go from there.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, members of the ITS committee, thank you so much for allowing me the time to do the research. Checked with some folks over here at MAG. We would be okay with the recommendation that Marshall had put forward. The action could be amended to include the additional language that he proposed, and then that can be taken into the TRC action that'll occur later this month.
Okay, hearing that, I guess I'd like, if let me put it this way, if there's any committee members today that are opposed to what Marshall was suggesting we add to the language, I think we should hear from you. Otherwise, I would say that we just move forward with that additional language, and then go ahead and take a vote on moving this forward. Okay, I am not seeing any hands raised. So I would move that we add that additional language in, and then go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and take a vote as long as we have a motion and a second to do so.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, we've got, was that you, Mike?
It was me. Yeah, Mike.
Okay. So Mike Sutton made a motion, and I believe Bruce Littleton is seconding that. So with that, we will go ahead and I will go ahead and poll, and if you can just indicate yay or nay when I do so. Susan.
Yay, approve.
Hugh.
Yay.
Alan Galicia.
Yay.
Albert.
Yay.
Hong.
Yay.
Bruce.
Yay.
David.
Yay.
Marshall.
Yay.
Raquel.
Yay.
Ward.
Yay.
Mike.
Yay.
Tessa. Okay, John Willett.
Yay.
April.
Yay.
And Marty.
Yay.
Okay, with the motion and a second, when members polled on the teleconference, the motion passes with Marshall's comments noted. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to item number 7. Does any member of the ITS committee have topics or issues of interest that you would like to have considered for discussion at a future meeting? If so, indicate so by raising your hand. Okay, seeing none, you can always reach out to Jeff or myself if you have an item that you think of later. We're going to go ahead and go around for comments for members to share any information related to ongoing ITS projects in their jurisdictions. So with that, Susan.
No update today. Thank you.
Thank you. Hugh.
Nothing for Goodyear.
Okay, Alan,
Nothing from Glendale.
Albert,
No update today.
Hong,
No update. Thank you.
thank you. Bruce,
Just want to mention we have a signal system specialist one position that'll be posted shortly. And like we always do, I'm willing to rob from anybody's staff. But just mention that we do have an opening essentially for a person in the DMC.
okay, thank you, Bruce. David,
No update from Tempe other than to wish everyone happy holidays.
thank you, David. No updates from Peoria at this time either. Marshall,
No update.
thank you. Raquel,
No updates.
Ward,
No updates.
Mike,
No update.
Tessa,
No update.
John,
No updates, and thank you, Patrick, for finding out that we can make that amendment like you did. Have a good day, everybody.
April,
Just a quick update if you guys haven't heard, Faisal Salim, he's leaving McDOT and exploring new opportunities. He's on vacation right now, but we'll be back December 6th, I think. So more to come on that.
great, thank you, April. And Marty,
Nothing from Valley Metro.
okay. The next meeting of the Intelligent Transportation Committee will be held at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, January 5th of 2022 via virtual conference, unless otherwise notified. Thank you all for your time today, and I wish you the best in the holidays to come. And the meeting is adjourned.